And good. Okay. And so we're going to call this meeting of Belmont's Information Technology Advisory Committee to order. And the first order of business is to review the minutes from our previous meeting. And I have shared those with the group. Can you guys see that screen?
Yeah.
I am able to see it now.
Yeah,
That's the
Dave,
that's
this version, right? This is an old version.
I sent
Yeah.
a correction to that like right after it, Paul.
Oh,
Want me to share the correct one?
yeah, go ahead.
There it is.
If you can make it a little bigger too, that would be helpful.
Paul,
You're not allowed to?
host has disabled participant screen sharing.
It's because I don't trust you, Dave.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't blame you for that.
go ahead. You should be okay now.
There we go. Okay.
Oh, nice and big. Okay, great.
Just let me know when to scroll.
Yeah, I reviewed these earlier, Dave, and they looked fine.
Yeah, I'm good with them. I reviewed them earlier.
Yep, as I did. They look great. And a couple of those topics we're going to, I think, return to this evening, but I am okay with them if everybody else is. No corrections or clarifications. Somebody want to move to adopt the minutes from the June 2nd meeting?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Great. And I think we need to do a roll call vote here. So I'll start with Jonathan Green,
Yes.
Glenn Wong,
Yes.
Dan Ellard,
Yes.
Phil Lawrence, muted.
Come on, Phil.
Sorry, aye.
Jim Barrett.
Present. Just kidding. Yes.
I vote aye as well. Charles Smart.
Yes. Yes.
And Dave, I think you usually
I always abstain because I feel guilty of voting for my own thing. All right, all set.
It's like that movie Election where the guy doesn't vote for himself. Okay.
Right.
Oh, and Steve Mazzola is here. Great. I'm going to let Steve in. Great. So with that, the minutes are adopted. And let's just see here. I'm going to, let's see. We have public comments and questions. I don't believe that we have anybody. Nava is here, but I have her on the agenda already. So without any other further comments, I think we can move past that item. And Mr. Mazzola is here to discuss the Belmont Public Schools remote learning and device plans per our meeting. What do we want to do first? Because this might be a long discussion. Steve, would you be okay if we heard from Nava first and then went on to have our discussion with you?
Sure, absolutely.
Are you, if you're on a tight deadline or what have you, I'm happy to flip it, to keep it as it is. But I thought, I'm guessing it'll be a longer discussion with you and we've got Nava here, so. That's okay with you?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so Nava, well, first of all, welcome to the IT Advisory Committee meeting. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And
Appreciate it.
I reached out to you because Dave Petto, who's one of our members, had passed on a request that you had sent to him on just looking for some help from this committee on kind of a project that you're doing with the Age Friendly Advisory Council. So maybe just start by telling us, if we're not familiar with it, what the Age Friendly Advisory Council is all about, and then kind of how we can help you.
Mhm. Sure. Thank you. So the Age Advisory Council is a group that's comprised of various stakeholders, some department heads, some other members of the community, for example, from the Housing Trust, social workers at large who work with the seniors, fire, health, police, schools, and a number of others. And the reason that we've come out is because Belmont now is considered, and it's called an age-friendly community, which means that we've gotten certain benchmarks approved by National AARP and World Health Organization in moving towards a much more what we call age-friendly community, which I'll define in a second. So as an age-friendly community, we've already done a lot of needs assessments, focus groups, etc. Now we have this council that's developing what's required of us, and that is a long-term action plan. And the action plan has to be, we have to come up with actionable goals for the next 4 years, and they need to represent some of the what's called the 8 domains of being an age-friendly community. So I won't go into all the domains, but we identified as an important domain that needs a lot of work is community communications and information. So what that means is our seniors integrated into the community, are we, not just seniors, but across the generations, are we communicating adequately? And our council said we've got a lot of work to do in that area. So, so as part of that, the suggestion came up, well, maybe what we can do if we got resources, and we don't need to put a whole lot of money into this, but what we do need is to figure out communications infrastructure that across the town that would enable seniors to be fully cognizant of going on in the community, and reverse, that other parts of the community would be fully informed on an ongoing, robust way with the older adult community, not just the senior center. I mean, that's part of it, but not just us. This is because there are a lot of gaps in how we're able to get messages across, how we're able to communicate. We also understand that we are really in silos much of the time. So an example I'll give you is that it became clear from the 2 members on the council, one, Tim Flood, who is very, he represents the disability community, but he also is very involved in special needs education. He and Alice Melnikoff from the schools shared things that were going on at the Chenery that, a diversity initiative, events going on that would be completely appropriate for seniors to be involved with in some manner or form. We had no idea about it. So it's that kind of where we really, one would tend to think that, just getting, let's say just getting our message on Kathy Grant's all school email, that would suffice, or a reverse, some mechanism, but it doesn't happen. So that's why we want to think more deeply. How can we look at this more broadly, more deeply, and that's so. As we thought about it, we thought, well, we just, before we, think of getting a consultant, any of that, we just, it makes sense to and be aware of what you're doing in terms of that broader communications infrastructure building, and whether anybody might on the committee be interested in working with possibly any consultant or other person who can devote a lot of time to what we want to have done.
Are there examples, just a quick question, are there examples of where you think that, I mean, it's good to have negative examples, but are there positive examples of where communication actually works, and where, we have something that we can have a little bit of a model of what is good communication, and how usually or otherwise.
Well, I'll give you a very positive one, which was we had two Belmont High School students who wanted this project called Snapshots in Wisdom. And for those of you who are involved with the Belmont Media Center, they were interviewed. I forget the gentleman's name, but in any case, we give an award each year for a good what we consider an excellent intergenerational program, and that the communications around that, the high school is really really promoted it. The award ceremony, there was a lot of good back and forth. Schools and the Council on Aging and the senior. So that's a very targeted thing. It also got a big splash on the Media Center through, as I mentioned, an interview there. That's, that was very, very nice kind of thing. Okay. We do have Facebook presence, and I think that to some degree has been helpful in getting messages back and forth. Belmont Helps is also has emerged as a really outstanding organization and communicates very easily with us. So we're able to get anything they want shared with us, and the reverse. So that's been a really great partnership.
It's good. Those are really good. I think because you want to start with, okay, what actually works? What are the communication vehicles that you have already in place that you probably want to start with and leverage, and then augment in electronic means or maybe more socially coordinated means, right? Yeah.
So to that point, I think that some of what you describe might be addressed as the town looks to refresh the town website, and maybe making it more age-friendly, or way to segment certain things, postings on that, or tag certain postings on the website, so that the seniors can easily find information that's of interest to them. And, and that sort of dovetails with a bit of our work on this committee
Oh.
as we've been pushing the town to proceed and that endeavor.
And
Oh,
maybe,
that's really good to know. I mean, I think that's great. If there's a voice from one of us on, just aspects of that, that would be awesome.
yep. And maybe,
Seems like there's
making
two
it,
sides to this. One is the getting the information to the right people, but also getting the information somewhere. Right now, there are too many places where the information might go, and people can't be expected to monitor all these places. So we need some sort of central clearinghouse for where people know that they can find information like this.
Yeah.
But to have it organized in a way that, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm so glad you mentioned this, because an example that's come up, and I've actually, that's come up in our open hearings on when we became age friendly, and what it came up, which is a clearinghouse for volunteers in town. And that came up in our contest, and I did bring it to the select board on several occasions. And no, but that's, when you talk about clearinghouse for information, that is just, to me, a great need. People come to us and they want to volunteer, but they don't necessarily, seniors, but they don't necessarily want to.
A member on that committee.
So please educate me. There is an advisory committee on developing a new website. This is good information for me.
I'm sort of throwing that out there, never as much as a question as a statement.
Oh,
Okay?
I see. Okay.
Because I think Paul may know the answer to that, whereas I don't.
No, that is something we were moving ahead with Patrice Garvin, and then COVID happened. So,
Okay.
so I would say we have a commitment from the Board of Selectmen and from the town administrator to set up a committee to evaluate and make recommendations on revamping the town's website, making it modern, making it accessible. But that's really been put on hold. I am actually meeting with Patrice tomorrow, actually on a separate matter about the Foundation for Belmont Education 5K run. But I will bring that up with her as well and see if we can get that back on track now that, things are moving again, the wheels are turning again. Town meeting is behind us and so on. So I will bring that up with her again. But that is, it's correct to say that there is motion towards that, but it has been delayed a little bit just because of the pandemic.
Right. And I recognize that part of the challenge is that for our older seniors, they're not on the right side of the digital divide, and that makes it difficult. But, but there are enough seniors in their 70s and 80s and some in their 90s who are adept at the technology that, that it shouldn't be the technology itself that's a barrier. I agree that for us at the Council on Aging, now having so many different sources, we don't know what people are actually responding to. I mean, when you have local elections, what are the candidates doing? I've heard that candidates are having a hard time knowing where to reach their audiences.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So, I mean, my sense is, some of these problems are not problems that are limited to the senior community. They're problems that affect all parts of the Belmont community. I think, some of it are just problems that are inherent in our understaffed, underfunded town government that doesn't have a lot of resources to throw at managing the website and keeping information up to date, and then looking beyond that to not only is the information up to date and you can find it, but how can we go out and meet people where they are online, and or if they're not online, find a way to get information to them. So, and I think that I think that there are plenty of 30 and 40 something folks out there who would probably say the same thing. Like, I don't know where to find information on the local races. I don't know where to find information on what's going on in the community. I hear you, and I think where it hits the seniors in particular is, as you said, the sort of digital native stuff. I think, and I've talked to seniors before who feel out of the loop when, let's say, the Citizen Herald or Belmontonian or some committee does an online survey, and they're not online all the time, so they don't get to participate in it because they don't see it, and so their voice doesn't get represented in the data that gets collected there. So that's one problem. How do we get seniors to be more digitally savvy? And then there's the bigger problem of how do we really make kind of the government and the workings of government a little bit more accessible and transparent. Much bigger problem, but a real one. But there are so many, I think there are so many great tools and platforms out there now, especially these days. I think it's a solvable problem. What would be a good way to move forward, Nava, in your thinking, to help you guys out and bring some of the expertise we have on this committee to bear?
Well, this was eye-opening. Just learning that that there's this effort underfoot to revamp the website and some of the things that that we're looking for. That's tremendous, and your invitation to consider membership on that, I think is tremendous. I think that would be one way. Perhaps I think keeping this communication going in some fashion would be very helpful. If at all possible, perhaps whoever might be interested, we could have you as a guest at one of our meetings, and that way it's not just my concern or suggestions. The other folks would get to know your work. Typically, we meet once every few weeks in the middle of the day. So I don't know if that would be that. Efforts, yeah, I mean, we'd be happy to see about accessing grants or that kind of thing,
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing we could do is just to have a liaison to your committee, and
Right.
that person could, or persons, we could have multiple, just make it a point to attend and at least while you're working on this communications problem, kind of be there to provide input and bring stuff back to this committee where there's a need.
That's a great idea, right? Kind of formalizing a liaison. Yep, we could do that.
Okay.
I think that's great.
And in terms of the education stuff, I mean, that's a big issue. I know Glenn has organized a series of talks around different technology topics, including cybersecurity. Nava, you know that I gave presentations at the Center on cybersecurity. That seems to be an area, I don't know if that's part of your mandate, but that's definitely an area where there's a lot of need for knowledge and education and information sharing.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that might be another
Yes.
area where we could collaborate as well.
For certain, and certainly, and with COVID this period, there's been an extra need.
Yeah,
So
right.
the police department, they did an online program for us about it, more in the the traditional scams, but they're online scams and so forth. But thank you. We'll continue and reach out in that way, because we are doing programming online. That's all we can do. Can't do it in person yet.
Sure.
I think I don't want to take over Paul's role of, quote, speaking for the committee, but please remember that we always welcome people attending. Our problem is getting people to attend. So I think I can safely say that if you'd like to attend our meetings, we'd be delighted to have you.
Well, thank you. I will bring that back to the membership, and somebody I think having a liaison would be really good, and keeping this conversation, and certainly anything that develops around this advisory committee, please, whoever you wish to be the person to let me know. That would be great.
Absolutely, Nava. Yeah, I mean, we had recommended that there be good representation on the committee from the senior community for obvious reasons. And so I think when we get around to, I think it's the select board who's probably going to appoint the committee. And when we get around to doing that, I'll make sure that you are in the loop and in the room where it happened. Okay.
Okay. Very good. And thank you. Good to meet you all. And thanks for what you're doing. And we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Nava. Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you. Right. Bye-bye.
Okay, we can. I think we can move along. I don't know. Do we feel like we need to appoint a liaison now, or should we do that at a later time?
Since I just got laid off, I could actually attend a midday meeting if you want me to do it, at least for a period of time.
Okay. If you're willing to do it, we'd let
sure.
that
I probably need to work with you or Phil or Len on the materials that if I'm going to give a presentation, but because you guys own all that stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I could do that.
Okay.
I'm happy to help if you want to ping me on it.
Okay, great. Okay, I will loop you in with Nava via email, okay, and let her know that you guys both threw your hands up.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry to hear about
I
didn't know that.
Yeah, well, it just happened a week and a half ago. My last day is Friday.
Is it are they furloughing, or are they just?
No, they did a restructuring and decided they had too many directors. I'm one of like 35. Actually, a couple of VPs got canned as well.
Ugh.
So yeah.
I'm sorry. All right.
Yeah,
well,
me too.
Thanks.
We and our LinkedIn networks are all here for you.
Yeah. I joined LinkedIn. I hadn't been because I was like, I didn't want to be annoyed by headhunters. And when I talked to my former boss who retired in December, right after, he says, well, now it's time for you to join LinkedIn.
It is. So if we're not connected, connect with me and
Sure.
the other members of the team, and feel
Thanks.
free to ask for introductions or any way we can help. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Mr. Mazzola, are you still with us? You are. There he is.
Hey, guys.
How you doing?
Hey.
Doing well.
How are
In
things?
my bunker. I'm sorry, what's that?
How are things? How you been?
It's been busy, much like everyone here. It's been getting an operation that is, most of the staff is, in the buildings and in the classrooms and hands-on and things like that, moving to a support operation.
Yeah.
However, the good news is that because, as you know, we've been moving, our services to the cloud for a couple of years now, and recently this year we had moved our help desk abilities to the cloud as well. I mean, they were already in the cloud, but we added some features that allowed us to do remote sessions, which we typically don't do because we don't have outside people that we assist. It's basically our own during the day assistance. So just by coincidence, we had layered that on just before we got kicked out of the buildings in early March. And so what was great about that is it allowed us to provide remote support, not only to our staff who are now all at home, but also to families who needed assistance. So for example, that day we opened up a community support link. It's just an email address. And just like most help desk systems, if the families just send an email to that, to that address, then it automatically opens a support ticket. So it was nice integration into our system. And then we would either do a live session with the parents or just give them, just tech support basically, and give them some ideas on what's going on. So all in all, we actually kept very busy throughout the time. And then of course now we're kind of turning our attention from the school year that ended in June, and we've been looking at the opening this fall, which, as you know, is undetermined.
Yes. Undetermined here and everywhere, pretty much, as far as I can tell. I guess maybe a good place to start would be kind of where things are now, and how you were able to kind of support the end of the school year from an IT perspective, and then where things are going, how you see things shaping up into the fall, what the different kind of back to school scenarios are, and how you're going to be supporting those.
Right. So, we've been continuing our support as we did right when the schools changed, although that's been, more for teachers, because I'm not sure if you saw, but we opened up a bunch of workshop for teachers around technology. Some of the things that they'd not been exposed to before, like Zoom or Google Meet sessions. And there's a whole bunch of others that they've been doing. So that's an ongoing process, and something that we really thought they needed in order to be better prepared for the fall. And so beyond that, and that's now up and running, and that's fine. But our full attention is preparing a couple of things. One, of course, is devices for the students in the eventuality that either we have a hybrid approach, or we have this kind of, an approach where everyone stays home. They don't really, go into the school full time. It's unclear as to which way we're going to be going. And I can say that because there's been, we've been doing a lot of communication within the district on the administrative team, around this question. Yet a lot of the second tier decision-making couldn't happen until the state came out with their guidance, which, as you know, came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So
now that we have that in hand, now we kind of know what the framework is, what the parameters are. These are the things you can do, these are the things you can't do. So the request from the Department of Education is that we have 3 scenarios submitted to the state. and that's going to be August 1st, around there. So at that point, assuming that we submit it and the state says, yeah, they're all good, and then there'll be some announcement, I'm sure, by the superintendent and the school committee as to which one will be adopted. As you know, I think I don't know. I mean, I don't make these decisions, but I don't think that we're really going to have a decision until later in the game, because things are changing. Things are changing weekly.
Yeah.
But at some point, we do need to, families do need to know what's going to happen. And to get to the other question is, so we are, and we have been for the past few weeks, been preparing a device for each student that they'll be able to take home. We just released the signups for actually a couple hours ago. People are signing up. So what we'll do is we'll know at that point, how many people can get their devices now. Summer's a tough time. It's always a tough time. I'm sure we'll probably have some signups in early September to accommodate those who are out for the entire summer. I've already heard from a few families. But the plan is to put a device into the hands of every student.
These are Chromebooks.
So if the student is in grade pre-K to 2, it'll be an iPad. Grades 3 to 12 will be a Chromebook. And if you remember, the high school already had a one-to-one program, so we're just continuing that. So that really doesn't change for the high school, other than we went from iPads to Chromebooks.
So are you basically redeploying the iPads to the lower grades and then supplying 3 through 12 with the Chromebooks?
Right. So exactly. So kind of the new piece there is the 3 through 8, actually.
That's right.
So
right.
Not having one-to-one.
Right.
So if you think about it from a budget standpoint, we already budgeted for the high school because we knew basically we were just taking the iPad cost and making it a Chromebook cost. The pre-K to 2, we're taking all of those iPads that we got back from the seniors not too long ago, from all the high school students not too long ago, and they're being reallocated for grades pre-K to 2. So that cost is already assumed. So the piece that we really didn't have budgeted for was the 3 through 8 piece.
Is there a sense that there'll be a lot more kind of coming back broken, given sort of the demographics that you're deploying these devices into?
Well, it's going to be modeled the same way that we do with the one-to-one program at the high school. I mean, the good thing is that we've had 7 years of experience with that, so we have a pretty good idea. Now, of course, we were doing iPads, and we do know that the iPads are more durable than the Chromebooks, because if you look at, because we've had for a couple of years now, we've had a lot of Chromebooks at Chenery, and it is a higher rate of breakage or manipulation, if you will, with the Chromebooks. So Phil, to answer your question, I think that, we certainly did get extra stock. We purchased extra stock to have in hand. How we're going to assess those devices and how we're in fact, if they need to be fixed or worked on or something, it's not like the old days where the high school student could just come into our office and
right.
we could do a one-on-one with them and help them. So this is something we've been talking about in our staff meetings on a fairly regular basis. And I mean, we'll have a plan in place by the end of July as to what that support mechanism is going to look like. But our first goal is to get the devices out, or at least get them underway.
Yeah.
And then depending on what the model is, we're just going to have to make it so that if a student has a Chromebook or even an iPad, say with a cracked screen or something, we're going to have to have a vehicle for them to be able to come in safely and drop the device off, and we'll have a swap all ready for them, because that's frankly what we do now.
Yeah.
And chances are they won't get the original one back. They'll just keep the swap out. So there's only one interaction.
Right. And is there I think everything's on the cloud, so there's not going to be any data on the device that you are going to want to get off and that kind of stuff.
No, because if it's so for example, if it's a Chromebook, then it's all associated with their BelmontSchools.net
Yeah.
account.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
And everything else, all the filtering, everything. Another coincidence, we already had planned, we actually had the box in our office the day we got kicked out to move all of our filtering into the cloud anyways, and that's been done. So that's going to be a big help because that will reduce all the backhaul into our network.
Steve, I have a question. It's been a long time since I've been around third or fourth graders, but a long time. But it would seem to me intuitively that the third and fourth graders from a device need aspect would be more in line with the K through 2 than with the middle school people. What was the rationale behind giving them Chromebooks instead of iPads, please?
Yeah, no, you're right. And we had that debate internally, not because of this, but in the previous year. And what we did is, we sat down with the elementary principals and we said, okay, we're doing this at the high school, we're going to move from iPads to Chromebooks. So the question to them was, if we're making changes, what's your preference in your schools with your teachers? And they have a great handle on their schools and their teachers, and they all wanted to retain the iPads for the K-2 kids. It depends if you talk to, and I also talked to colleagues in other districts, and most of them, if they're doing this kind of divide, iPads and Chromebooks on the elementary level, grade 2 is kind of the place where they could go either way. Based on that, I felt comfortable that if the principals wanted the iPads for K2, that was fine. Now your question about, grade 3 and 4,
right?
We also asked, a number of the grade 3 and 4 teachers, particularly after we had put Chromebook carts in the elementary schools. How did it go? What do you think? And, like any kind of transition grade, academically, yeah, you have a few students in grade 3 who might struggle with keyboarding, for example. But for the vast majority of the teachers report that grade 3 is in fact the appropriate place to take that break.
Not what I would have assumed, but then again, it's been a long time,
And that's why and frankly, that's not the decision for me to make. That's, we're going to support their decisions, just like a lot of other things we do. It's really what the teachers felt and what the building principals felt.
Yeah.
Do we know, everything I've heard suggests that, if kids are back in school, it's going to be a subset of kids each day, just to reduce density and prevent, virus spreading with lower density. Do we have an idea yet how the kind of hybrid, some of your kids are there physically, some are not, is going to work, and what your team's being asked to do to support that?
No. There's been no, since the release of the guidance from the Department of Education, there's been no decisions about which path. They're all, 3 of them are still under consideration. There is now a working group of teachers who are going to help mold and contribute to that process. So I suspect that.
And who's organizing those teachers?
That's through the superintendent's office.
It is, yeah.
And of course, the building principals are deeply involved. And they have to look at each of their own buildings because, as you know, each school in Belmont has different characteristics, different layouts, different populations. So, and the superintendent has said on several occasions that, in school committee meetings that, we may start out with one model and then a few months in shift to another one. So, to answer your question about our work, I feel as though, our responsibility is to have contingencies for all 3 models and frankly, be able to shift, if we're asked to do so mid-year.
Steve, you mentioned keyboarding a little while ago. Is there anything built into the curriculum these days to actually teach keyboarding skills, or are we actually developing a generation of hunt and peck typists?
Yeah, as long as I've been in Belmont, there's not been what I would call a coordinated part of the curriculum around keyboarding. There has been over the years, PTO, after school programs. There's been some teachers who have taken upon themselves within a school because the principal felt as though that was something that they wanted to work on. That's occurred, but not what I would call from a systemic curriculum standpoint.
So in your estimation, what fraction of the students by the time they graduate high school are touch typists?
No idea.
I think it's pretty low.
Why is that? Why are we sending kids out of high school not able to touch type?
Yeah, it's nuts.
Because you can't touch type on your phone.
Yeah.
Well, I think too.
Hard to write term papers on your phone also, so.
Yeah. I mean, every time that the conversation comes up, in my experience with the question about having some kind of formal typing program where kids are going to learn touch typing, the question inevitably is, okay, well, what are you going to not do?
Yeah.
Are you not going to, take it to its extreme? Okay, if you're going to do this, are you not going to do the extra math sets? Are you not going to do literacy? That extra piece of literacy.
So it's a resource issue.
Well, I don't know if it's
priorities, right?
Yeah, again, that's not my game. I don't dictate that. I'm not going to say that I do. But
Steve from this conversation, but I mean, let's be honest here, guys. Anytime if the conversation is, well, if we do this, we're going to have to not do something else. That is a resource conversation. That means we don't have the money to do both, so something's got to go. What's it going to be?
But it's not just money; it's time.
Well,
yeah, it's more towards time, I think, than.
But it could be an elective, in which case it's not a zero sum, right? It's just sort of saying, hey, and which is how it was when I went to high school. Like, you didn't have to take typing, but most people recognize it as a pretty important skill to have as somebody who might be working in an office. So some kids took it and some kids didn't. I don't understand why that would be a time issue in Belmont.
In that case, I'd agree with you.
Yeah.
Here's the irony on this, okay?
I think it's an FTE issue.
Yeah, but
20
years ago, it wasn't considered to be an FTE issue. 20 years ago, my two kids learned how to keyboard in school. They certainly didn't learn it from their parents at home because my wife and I are not very good typists. But they learned, and it was part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
Don't ask me what part it was, but it existed 20 years ago.
I learned at Wellesley High, and it has been very useful to me as a writer, let me tell you. So
well, I think there's actually we're saying this all like it's a terrible thing, but I think it's actually an improvement in some ways that we're giving the upper grades keyboards. I thought it was always painful to watch my daughter type on the iPad.
Yeah.
I thought that was teaching her terrible typing skills. So this isn't a complete answer because we still have to teach people how to properly type, but at least we're giving them something they can type on, which is good.
Sure.
Steve,
And I'm sure there's a YouTube video to teach them how to put their fingers in the right place.
Oh, there are some great apps. I mean, I don't even know. One thing I would say is, like, there are some amazing websites where you can basically teach yourself to touch type. So
yeah, it's this Mavis Bacon or whatever it is teaches typing or work for my daughters.
Yeah, work for my daughters.
Steve, if I can just jump in, I wanted to ask maybe 3 questions about some of the things you just talked about. One was just a procedural question, because you had mentioned the 3 different models that we had submitted. The state has to approve them, but ultimately, who decides which model we follow? Is that a local decision, i.e., the superintendent, or is it sort of some cross-function of the superintendent and state guidance, or is it the state altogether that just says all schools will follow, option 1 of the 3 that they submitted in?
Yeah, Glenn, I don't know ultimately what portion of, in other words, you're right, there are multi-levels of decision-making. In other words, you know, the governor could say, well, no school's going to be open. Now, I don't think that's going to happen.
Sure. Right.
Just like you said, all schools are going to close. But yeah, it is going to be a local decision. You know, I'm sure there's probably some coordination with area communities about what they're doing and what we possibly could do. But, you know, as you probably surmised, each school district, even though there are some similarities,
Are quite unique.
very different circumstances.
Okay. The second thing is you mentioned earlier that you had quite a bit in terms of programming for the teachers, right? You know, using different technology skills and such. Was that something that you were able to source through your own staff, or did you have to contract that out?
No, we did it all internally.
Okay, that's awesome.
It wasn't my technology staff. It was teachers who we we solicited to do them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, did your office then help just to coordinate that, or was it more like you were in an enabling function?
It actually came through the assistant superintendent's office as part of our plan to reopen. It just happens to be one of the first things we're doing, because it didn't matter which plan we're doing. We know we need some new skills or up-to-date skills. So, but we did facilitate it because, you know, there was licensing we had to get for, you know, smart board and, you know, remote use of smart boards, and just assisting with some of the ability for someone to teach each of those workshops remotely, like we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the third question I had was around the device adoption. And, you know, I know you had made devices available to students, you know, in the last year. And I was just curious, you know, what if the number of students who took advantage of that program like met your expectations, and what you're planning for in the future? Because I know there was an opt-out, right? If students had their own computers or other resources, they could choose not to use or pick up. And I was just curious what those rates are like and how it turned out to be.
So going forward, we did, and this actually came out, this was well before we left, so we didn't really know that we were going to be doing remote learning. This was we strictly asked the high school families because we're making this transition. So, and we do know that some, you know, high school students, when we were in school, we could see that they brought their own devices. Mm-hmm. So when we went to make the switch, we said, okay, let's ping the families of the high school students and find out if, you know, if they're going to bring their own device or whether they want one provided to them. And so we sent that to all the rising students, including the 8th graders. And we only had, you know, so we're going to have 1,340, 50 students in the high school this year, maybe a little more. Only 28 opted out.
Wow. Okay.
Now, I think what happened was this process was started before we went to remote learning. In other words, our thought was, you know, I thought it would be more than that. I thought it'd be at least 100. You know, maybe 10% or something. It seemed like a good number. But what happened is when everyone felt the pain of remote learning, they said, we need more devices. So even if they had a device, maybe it wasn't the most reliable or the best, or maybe they were crunched for devices. Mm-hmm. You know, in retrospect now, it just so happened that we were doing the whole assessment as we got kicked out of the buildings and people were feeling the crunch. So it doesn't surprise me now, looking back on it, that we got such a low request to opt out.
Right. And then I've got actually a fourth. I just realized I had a fourth question, which is
sorry, Glenn, so Steve, to clarify, so will there be a small group of kids who are doing basically BYOD within Belmont High, or is it just everybody's getting a Chromebook?
So the offer was to give everyone a Chromebook.
Yeah.
And then in the same breath, we asked, does anyone not want one? And we got 28 responses saying, I don't want one.
And so you did not order them for those people?
Well, basically, we ordered enough for basically for the high school because, frankly,
Doesn't make a difference. Right.
yeah, whatever the number was, is we'll use for stock, we'll use for replacements,
Right.
and things like that. 'Cause the problem is that the difficult part of this whole process has been that the supply chain has been very erratic.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that we ordered before the pandemic, we ordered the high school Chromebooks from Dell.
Yeah.
So let's call it late February.
Right.
We only got those a few weeks ago.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and it's funny. There's no rhyme or reason. All of a sudden, I'll get a ping from our rep and say, "Oh, the ship date has moved 3 weeks." I'm like, "What happened?" So we were lucky that we were kind of first in line. I'm still waiting for devices.
Yeah.
But
well, I think what happened is COVID happened. So for those kids who said no thanks, they will be bringing their own device, a Chromebook or another device, and basically you'll support that.
Right, we don't support the hardware.
Right. Of course.
We said that in the email.
Right.
Because we don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
No. Right.
So, however, we will of course continue to support their BelmontSchools.net accounts on those devices.
Okay. Right.
And any software that teachers need them to use.
Go ahead, Glenn. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. Well, the last question I had was just related to, like, once you've got the devices, I was just curious if you've been fielding calls or helping families that might actually not have the bandwidth they need, right? Because and that was just my own experience. I've got 3 kids in the Belmont school systems, plus myself and my wife working from home. So at any given time, there could be 5 of us on video conferences, right? So I'm just curious if that's come up as an issue with remote learning being, considered. Because I know, like in the last year, the learning or the live sessions with teachers were sort of optional, right? The whole idea was that the learning was you do it on your own, and then the teachers were resources. But if we're considering more remote learning options, it seems like, again, the access to bandwidth may suddenly become an issue. And I was curious if that's been considered or talked about, or maybe, I'm overthinking it and everyone in Belmont has great internet access. I'm not sure.
No, and Paul was actually looped into this a while ago. So when we first went out, we were fielding requests from some families around bandwidth. Some just didn't have any, had no internet connection.
Okay.
And so we pinged Paul, and he graciously volunteered to help assist. And then I think what happened is I think it all sorted itself out. We only had a handful of families. But I can tell you that, the lessons learned from kind of being thrust into this is, first of all, you're right. We do know that there's varying levels of internet access, depending on the number of people in the house. Although for the most part, and frankly, this extends to our staff as well. This is not just a family thing.
Yeah.
There are needs among our staff. However, we think that's settled down for the most part. Okay. The wild cards we found as we debrief as a staff, we found that the personally owned devices at times can be very unreliable and not cared for, and sometimes have parental controls on them, and sometimes are being used by a parent and the student. So there's a confusion over who's logged in when. We spent a lot of time on the phone with families unraveling what people thought were kind of software issues, and they turned out to be permission/login issues. So one of the reasons behind giving everyone a district-owned device and a district-managed device is that we'll just have greater control over that situation. Because as you pointed out, Glenn, kind of in the spring, it was, okay, we're in this situation, and we're going to make best as we can, but you can't just throw a whole school district out on the street and expect everything to continue the way it is. But now going to the fall, we are going to expect to do closer to what we want to do, and we need to have more dependable devices to do that. Just take some of the variables out of the equation.
Right. No, that's a really good argument for adopting the. Yeah, I was just gonna say that's a great argument for encouraging people to accept the devices, right? and it's sort of good that there was such a low number that opted out.
Yeah, and I got a few pings from families today saying, we already own an iPad, but we don't have a Chromebook. Do I need to take you? And I said, no, you can mix and match if you want. But I said, I do recommend that the best experience may be from taking a district device. But in the end, it's their decision.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Are these devices Wi-Fi only, or do they have capacity to connect to Ethernet?
No, they're all, well, certainly iPads are Wi-Fi only, and the Chromebooks
Yeah. But I mean the
are the
Chromebook.
same.
Sorry.
I guess unless you had a maybe USB-C to Ethernet adapter or something.
Easily acquired.
Yeah, we haven't. That's not one of our supported models, I guess. So.
Okay.
Steve, am I right in assuming that, and admittedly this was during normal times, not pandemic times, that Cambridge Rindge and Latin uses Chromebooks for their students? Do you happen to know that? The
Don't know
reason I
offhand.
think they do is I do some volunteering there, and I've heard that they do. But,
I don't know.
I was just wondering if you had heard of experiences in other neighboring districts, with the Chromebooks and their suitability actually for this type of use.
Yeah,
Again,
I do meet monthly with area districts, actually part of our EDCO collaborative. So they're not all right next door, although Arlington's one of the members. But and we all had similar stories about supporting families and issues with devices and issues with internet access. So it was a good sounding board to get some pretty good ideas from folks about what worked for them and what didn't.
Steve, is there, I know you probably already dealt with this a little bit in the spring, but, obviously, as we go back to fall, as you're mentioning, there is this need to almost do on-site support in some cases for families where, there could be something simple going on but it's confusing and nobody can troubleshoot it. Obviously we don't want there to be downtime where kids are not available to participate remotely. But that, your team is not, set up to do that kind of, sneaker net, So I guess obviously how could we help and do we need to kind of run a flag up the pole to say, hey, we need to think about a way to support these families who, just are going to need some degree of ability to do on-site support to make sure all these kids are available to attend all their remote classes.
Yeah. So if you look at the issues for the past few months since March, since we went out, we've been able to at least solve, as best we know, all of those issues. In other words, it never came to the point where we had to go in. The only way to fix something was to physically be present. So most of the time, there's multiple tiers. The first tier is just kind of an email support. Second is we'll pick up the phone and walk them through them. That fixes, not half of those. And then some of it is really a device-specific issue where we'll do a device swap out, and that will typically take care of the rest of the issues. Now, not saying that that's not going to happen, because frankly, we're going to have, this time around, we only put out 250 odd devices to families on a loaner basis. And so, now we're going to have thousands. And so, I think I'd be naive to think that those circumstances that you just described will not occur.
As a follow-up to Paul's question, is there any kind of remote desktop type of software available for Chromebooks? I don't think there is for Macs, but maybe there is for Chromebooks.
Chrome has something like that. I've used it with my dad.
They do.
Remote support. Yeah.
They do, although the problem is, at least in the latest iteration that I saw, that they didn't have an automatic timeout. It's basically like an RDP, whatever
Yeah.
you Chrome session. But I think it requires both parties to terminate the session. Now that may have changed. So it's not something that we use, because I don't like leaving that open, but also we use Zoho Assist, and we've had some success using that with Chromebooks.
Okay.
Actually, we've done it sometimes with iPads too. It's not as easy, but frankly, with the iPads, all the stuff is being pushed down anyway in terms of apps and stuff like that. So frankly, we'll just tell, and we've done this, we just tell the family just to erase the thing. And, it's like a power wash. And then when you come back up, all the apps are going to re-download. And that usually takes care of a lot of issues too.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if there's something that you can preload onto them before they get distributed that will make your life easier when you have to scale up with all the potential issues.
Well, I'm hoping the Zoho Assist will take care of most of the Chromebook stuff, and that doesn't need to be preloaded, because that's a remote session invite. That'll happen real time.
Are there security concerns at all? I mean, I'm assuming you've thought through that, but as in, are these connected devices, anything subject to any sort of virus or a vector for ransomware or something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, the iPads, I don't know. I don't think so. The Chromebooks are a little more involved. Although coincidentally, just this morning, we finished all of our settings for the Chrome console. And and these are settings we've been using forever. I mean, we've implemented a few new ones because Google has put a few new ones out there, but we also recently had a external third party come in and do an assessment just on our security practices around our Google console. And so we were able to, identify some things that we needed to tweak, and we've done most of that. So
I guess the answer is yes, but you've thought about that and you think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think we are.
Okay.
Anytime that you have a lot of devices in a lot of young hands.
Yes, exactly.
You can't always control all of the circumstances, but I think, let's say a certain Chromebook gets compromised for one reason or another. I think the impact is more limited in that regard.
Okay. Limited because of your segregating networks. Why limited?
Well, more because the device is at home, so it's not directly attached. But also we do segment. We do have levels of policies depending on whether you're a student or staff, and then also depending on whether you're a high school student or third grader. So for one example is, if your Gmail account, that if you're a high school student, you can basically send and receive email from anyone. Right. And that's really required because of the work. But if you're in Chenery or below, we're going to restrict the email to be received only from a Belmont Schools account. So either belmontschools.net or belmont.k12.ma.us. So if a parent wants to email their kid on a district Gmail account, they're not going to be able to do that.
Got it.
So that's just an example of some of the things.
It's pretty locked down. You feel like that you've kind of through policies kind of gotten rid of most of the vectors.
Yeah, as best we can. I mean, I do feel good. I think we're probably one of the few districts that does a top to bottom Google console assessment. This is our second year.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
But I never say never.
Of course not.
I understand there were some policies around like students, it being inappropriate for students to screenshot things that they might have seen that were transmitted by cameras of other students or teachers because this is in their homes. I have a recollection of reading something like that on the documents. And I'm just wondering, related to the Chromebooks, whether like you're considering sending them along with, 10-cent slidable screen covers that can go over the cameras, just to give people that extra sense of security that their camera is not going to transmit anything. I think it would be money well spent if you can get them at bulk. Probably cost $100 or less for the entire school system.
Yeah, no, we've not considered that. And I think the instance that you were talking about, you're right, Jim. This was probably like 5 years ago now. There was a platform, Go Guardian, which is basically a way to control Chromebooks and other devices. And what happened is that their initial iteration, or one of their initial iterations of the software, allowed a teacher to access basically the camera or the screen remotely. The original intent was that the software was going to be used for a teacher to be able to look at the Chromebooks in their classroom and see who was, surfing the web when they weren't supposed to, or what tabs they had open. But that was supposed to be in the classroom. And there were no controls over on an administrative level to say, hey, after 3 p.m. or whatever it is, you can't use that feature anymore. Now they've since bottled that up, but that's what occurred there.
I was actually referring to something different. I can put it in the I can put it in the chat. There was this document that I saw that basically said that if you the district prohibits screenshots or video recording of any experience, and I took that to mean that if somebody walks across the camera view behind the student because it's in their home, and mouthy student who wants to perform some kind of bad acts takes a screenshot of that, and so he has some other person in that family walking around half clothed and sends that to Facebook. They wanted to prevent that, at least have a policy that said you're not supposed to do that. So I posted in the chat, but I was just wondering, is like, in addition to the policy, is an additional protection having having camera covers?
Yeah, we should definitely. I mean, the other issue, of course, is sextortion scams, which are a real problem. I mean, it's not an epidemic, but that they are a phenomena, and it's something that we should at least, and obviously if you're giving cameras to grades 3 and up, that's a vulnerable population for that type of thing. So it would seem to me also, Jim, like a very small expense, that if the district doesn't want to pick it up, maybe Foundation for Belmont Education or something could throw $500 or something at camera covers for all those devices, and Steve, you and your team could just make sure they're on there. It does seem like we should definitely have them. If these things have cameras built into the screen, we should definitely have slidable camera covers.
Too bad we didn't all make it to RSA. We could have all picked up enough tchotchkes of these.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
10 from this booth, 10 from that booth. Just go down the aisle.
Yes, exactly.
But that is a good point.
I'm sorry, I lost what Paul said.
Hey, Paul, you're breaking up again.
Oh, sorry.
That's right.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, now it's better.
Yep.
I was just saying, if it's something that the district, if it's not doable by the district, maybe the FBE or something could step up and make a purchase. But it does sound, given the very real issues around privacy threats and sextortion scams that are really out there, that we should be at least equipping kids to be able to make sure that camera can't be is only on when they want it to be on. Again, I think in bulk, they're probably a few pennies a piece, so it's not a huge expense.
Yeah, again, and I guess the reverse threat is that we have some sort of APT on our network that is utilizing these devices for whatever, turning on cameras, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. I assume that's something that we've kind of thought through and have measures of protection against as well. I think that's to you, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, part of there's kind of two layers there. One is, because all of the devices are going to be running through our filtering system, and that'll take care of some of that. But the bigger piece potentially is how is the home network configured, and what does that look like, and that's the unknown, right? So we're configuring our system to the best that we can.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, we're not going to be able to stop someone from clicking on a link or having a vulnerable, router set up at a home.
Yeah, exactly.
If we were to procure those, Steve, would it be something that you and your staff could deploy before you distributed the devices?
Well, certainly for I can look at what's available. We have to go through a purchasing process, so it wouldn't be for next week, that's for sure. They just wouldn't come in and be available. But we are doing this for 6 weeks, so the subsequent weeks. Yeah. And the expense is not the issue.
Yeah, no, it's just the logistics of it.
I can look into it.
Yeah, it's certainly good to
Yeah.
take whatever measures we think are appropriate to safeguard, the network against APTs, whatever, So actors, utilizing these devices in ways that we don't want them to be used.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, certainly Google has increased their security as well.
Yeah.
Not only on not only in Chrome, but also in the like in the management console. There's a lot more ability for us to fine tune things than we had even just a month ago.
That's good.
And a lot of it's around spam protection, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, I think there's gonna need to be a lot of support for families out there come fall. I wanna, make sure that you guys have the resources and the help that you need. And of course, also make sure that, offer this committee up as a resource to you to either make the case and help escalate things or, try and anticipate bumps and hazards. I mean, again, I know you already did a fire drill in the spring, and hopefully fall won't be too much different. But as you said, it is a different order of magnitude in terms of how many kids are going to be on school supported devices and I don't know. So whatever way I think we can be helpful or start communicating with other committees or groups within town to make sure that we're ahead of this problem, just let me know, and I'd be interested in the committee if the committee has any thoughts on that.
I mean, certainly I think we'll have unfortunately, I think is one of these things we'll have a much better idea once everyone gets back and things are kind of at full force. And and we've had a little bit of that and things seem to work pretty well, but a lot of those were personal devices, some were ours. Ultimately,
Yeah.
until we're really put it through a stress test, we won't really know what the levels are. But I do appreciate, your offer, and certainly keep that in mind as to, where we need to triage things to.
And even if there's, maybe should there be some program of kind of orienting parents in that kind of lead up to the beginning of the school year, just on some of the basic kind of blocking and tackling of, supporting their kids in remote learning and so on. I mean, I know there were discussion groups involving parents and faculty and staff around, how are we going to do remote learning and what's the remote, classroom going to look like. But honestly, in the spring, a lot of those conversations were kind of hijacked by, are we going to have a graduation ceremony or not? And so on. And people really went down the rabbit hole with that whole thing. And I feel like the conversation didn't move far enough along in terms of like, forget about graduation. What are we going to do come fall? And how are these remote classes going to work exactly? Because I think people felt like in the spring, it was really, teachers were getting a break because none of them were prepared for this, but I don't think parents were feeling like this is anywhere approaching what they're getting, in an in-person class environment. So I wonder if, kind of helping, and my sense is, the administration and the school committee talk to the town, and the PTOs kind of represent the parents back to the school committee and the administration. But there isn't really a sort of, nobody kind of talks directly to the parents, or if they do, it's through, Superintendent Phelan. But we need a much more, this is going to affect every kid and every family with a kid in the school system. So we need a much broader kind of interface to support that and get them oriented and make sure that their questions are getting answered and filter those up and so on. And I'm not sure I could tell you right now, that's not your problem, but I'm not sure I could tell you right now, just from my interactions with the school committee and the administration, that I know what that interface is or how they're going to manage that,
Right. And, there was a survey that did go out kind of midstream, asking parents about, hey, how's it going? What are the issues? And I can tell you, as recently as last week, there's an effort underway to, we already, that data was already looked at and was presented to the school committee last month.
Yeah.
However, there were dozens and dozens of pages of comments.
Yeah.
So those are actively being looked at and reviewed, every single one of them. So that's one touch point. At least there'll be some action or at least review on all of those. And I do know that one of the things that we talked about is that we do want to have, at least for parents, to have some kind of centralized gateway, depending on the grade level, for parents to access the curriculum and the documents for their grade level. It's akin to what Chenery did with they had a kind of a Chenery hub. I'm not sure if anyone has anyone at Chenery anymore, but and Wellington did the same thing. So it was kind of a one-stop shopping that was put together fairly quickly, but I think it had its merits. So we have a number of people who are working on that effort. So day one, hey, here's where you go. If you're in grade 6 at Chenery, here's all the information from the teams. Here's the information from your teachers. So you don't have to do the hundreds of emails, all the postings. It should all be in a more consolidated and coordinated fashion. So that came across loud and clear that is something that parents want. And we are also going to look at what other kind of documentation we can put together for parents on the technical side. In other words, hey, if your student has a district Chromebook, don't log in, make sure the student logs in with their BelmontSchools.net account. Because if they don't, they're going to have issues, or if they don't, they're going to have a different experience. And some of those things that we learned, try to get those, the bigger issues out there first, so that people are aware of what should be avoided and what should be done. I think we'll also be expanding. One thing we talked about, but it hasn't been kind of put into action yet, is can we put together a series of short videos on how does my kid log into their Chromebook, or what does that look like? What does the BelmontSchools.net account look like? How do I get to, for the younger grades on my iPad, or even with Google Classroom? What does that look like? How do I get signed up? Some of those things.
Yeah, that's a great idea. The video idea, that could be very helpful, for sure.
Paul, I just wanted to sort of ask you or the committee at large if there were any other specific things that we wanted to ask, or if we should maybe thank Steve for his time, because it is getting pretty late. I think not just for him, but for all of us. And we had a few other things on our agenda that I think we wanted to also cover off on.
Yeah, good input, Glenn. I feel like I've asked all the questions that I had to ask. If other committee members feel the same, I'm more than happy letting Steve go. And of course, reiterating, we're here and happy to help him with any of the challenges that come up in the next few months. And
yeah, Steve, it's great to hear what's going on again from you, and really appreciate your time being with us.
Sure, absolutely, anytime. Sorry, I didn't have more details about didn't have the inside scoop of the fall opening, but
oh well.
Even I don't have that.
The Globe actually just published an article a few hours ago saying that they're pushing school districts to do more in person, unsurprisingly. So I'm sure we'll get more of that. But they did make it clear it was the local districts that have that ultimate decision there. So no, Steve, thank you so much for coming in. It's like they said, I agree with my colleagues. It's been great to talk with you. And as a side note, expect an email from me, because remember how I'd set up an alert for Belmont school things for you based on my own company's product? I hadn't looked at that inbox for a while because I have all those emails shunted away. Something actually came in just under a month ago. And so I'm going to forward you for you to take a look at it.
Great. Glenn, I always appreciate that, you sending those to me. All right.
Little threat intel for you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for, as a thank you.
Good luck with all the planning.
In our meeting.
Right. All right. Thanks, guys.
Sure.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Have a good evening. Okay. So everybody with me?
Yep.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to propose. I think let's have a short discussion about the remote meeting Board of Selectmen. And given that I'm close but not quite finished with the ransomware report that Glenn and I have been working on, I'm going to propose postponing our executive session, but maybe only until early August, and then reconvening, and we can maybe just have an executive session meeting just focused on that. If that is people are amenable to that.
How does that fly with the open meeting law?
As in what?
You have to post for an executive session that you're not letting anybody else attend?
I think you can. Well, I think that the executive session is the only thing on the agenda. So you call the meeting to order, you immediately go into executive session.
Okay.
And, we have public comments and approved minutes from this meeting, and then go into executive session. So
yeah, I don't think there's going to be any problem with that.
Okay.
Okay. So on the remote meeting Board of Selectmen approval. Again, I think the consensus here is we should absolutely be advising the select board to move forward with that. And I guess, do we want to write some kind of formal kind of statement or something that we could present to them, or something along those lines, or what would be the best way to handle it?
What do we remember about their arguments against? Because we should be prepared to fully address those, right? Otherwise, they're going to say, well, the last time we said X, Y, Z, and we still haven't resolved that, right? So, yeah, go ahead.
My recollection is that first of all, by and large, they just kind of took a cautious approach, which is, the state is basically forcing our hand here, and so we're about to do a big trial of remote meeting because of this pandemic, and let's see how it goes, and then we don't need to make this decision now. We can make it after this COVID thing is over with, and we'll have more data and so on. They just pulled off what I think was actually a very highly successful remote town meeting with 300 odd people. So I can't think of a higher hurdle to clear than that.
Yeah. So I think that was one thing, and I can think of two other arguments against. One was, how do we do remote? How do we do executive sessions? And the other part is, what's the legality of remote participation versus, right now it's sort of mandated that there is remote participation, and the quorum is constituted by just participation on the remote session.
Yes.
When that order is lifted, have we fully resolved this? And I think a couple of things. First, we need them to ratify that remote participation is permissible, which is our right to do under open meeting law, right? And but it needs to be approved by the select board, and I think that's one of the things that we would propose, right? And then I mean, as far as executive session goes, I think we've been doing it, right? There's I think it's basically, if you have the moderator being, making it so that they only permit or they monitor the participantship, and they understand that there's only those who should be in executive session are on the meeting, right? That should be sufficient. I don't know if that's enforceable, or there's going to be sort of technological hurdles for folks there, right?
I can't think of a single argument that you couldn't just point to the last 3 months and be like, this is settled law. We've already done executive sessions. The arguments about participation and, well, maybe some people aren't comfortable with technology. Again, settled law. We've been doing remote meetings. We've had amazing, participation by the public of all age groups. So, I think the challenge is going to be that when this executive order expires, we're going to revert to the way things were before, which is, first of all, you need a physical quorum.
Right.
You can't do remote meetings. But that's a problem for the legislature to solve.
Right. So, Paul, my suggestion there, and I think a sort of a positive recommendation our group could make to the select board is to say, let's plan for the point where the state rescinds their emergency. Whatever it's called, the emergency state of emergency, right? And at that point, when that happens, we want to be in a position where we can continue to meet, in ways that we feel is appropriate for, our community. And so before that state, we want to work within the existing, there's sort of two prongs, right? The first prong is, let's do what we can do within the existing open meeting law to make sure that we can, use remote participation as an option, right? And that's allowed with the existing open meeting law. Then the second thing is, if they haven't already started it, to work with, our state representatives and senators to start working on legislative changes that would, address all the issues that we've just been talking about, right? Physical quorum and executive session. And, to be fair, and I don't know if everyone was aware of this, town meetings themselves were not really set up to work with remote meetings also, like the open meeting law. I don't, like, and I forget the details of it, but like I think we weren't empowered to do that by law, and so it so happened that before we had our virtual town meeting, the state did put out the equivalent of that state of emergency rule that allowed us all to meet virtually as committees. They put out something that also let towns make, like, town-wide decisions through remote participation. But what was interesting, and I found this sort of gratifying is the wrong word, but encouraging, I guess, is that the town had already initiated legal action to get special compensation from the governor or from the state to have our town meeting if this other thing hadn't actually happened.
Right.
So they understand this idea of being proactive about being legal about doing some of these things, and have already put in place some of those sorts of legal
And
motions.
I think Belmont was one of only 7 or 8 towns in the Bay State that had a remote town meeting. So it was a very small number. And I know I saw, I think on cable access, I forget whose town meeting it was, where they had, people out on the football field sitting in chairs. And I mean, you could tell that there was, very poor attendance. They were sitting out there in the sun on the field. And it was sort of like, wow, man, like, the way we did it actually, while there were some small technical snags, by and large, Glenn, I thought it went very, very smoothly.
Yeah, I mean, for
what it was,
didn't follow it. It was actually a pretty impressive logistic feat. It was also a 5-hour online meeting, right? But they took care of all the contingencies, and they were, again, Mike Widmer, the town clerk and all, did an amazing job.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there were still folks who couldn't even vote, and so they even had like an emergency phone line that you could call just to register your vote for that particular issue.
Yeah.
Right. It was well orchestrated. So.
Yeah, I agree. I was impressed. Go ahead. Glenn, I think those are great points, and I think you're dead on. Two prongs. One on making sure there's no interruption when that executive order expires, and that there's continuity with what we're already doing, and then the other to really encourage them to work with Dave and Will to make this happen at the legislative level. Charlie, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Our June meeting was, of course, before the town meeting, where you got all this sort of positive experience on how it could work with a huge group and work successfully. However, back in June 2nd, I made the suggestion, and I think everybody agreed, that before you go to the board, that you test the waters first with Patrice Garr and Dave Petto at least. And personally, I still think that's a good idea, just from a political standpoint.
Yeah, I think I still agree with that, because any impact that's gonna come of it in terms of resources the town needs to provide or whatever is gonna fall through them. It'd be good to have them on board. And frankly, given how things went, I don't know whether this is politically correct or not, but I think if somebody has a halfway decent relationship with the guy, somebody should reach out to Roy, because he was the only one who was raising any objections at our meeting. And I don't know how the last 3 months it may have changed his perspective.
That ain't me, so I don't know if one of you guys has a good
I don't know.
line of communication there. I would agree with that's good advice. And I am meeting with Patrice virtually tomorrow morning again on the Apple Run, and I will add it to my list of things to talk to her about to raise this and feel her out. My guess is she's going to say, go right ahead. I think great, good advice. But and I will. Glenn, do you want to maybe reach out to Dave via email and just get his input or thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay, that'd be great.
Sure.
And what were so Dave, what were you thinking with respect to Roy, to sort of see if he's sort of had a positive experience with recent online meetings and so on and so forth, and might have
if any of the experience of the last 3 months alleviates any of the concerns he had around, a lot of his concerns were around will remote becomes so much the norm that we have a hard time controlling things. I think he was worried about the fact that the law still says you have to have a physical quorum, and so many people will want to work remotely that people won't show up at the building. You know, it'd be interesting to see how he feels after what's happened. I mean, it may be he still says, if we don't solve the problem with the legislature on the physical quorum, then he really does have some concerns about opening it up too broadly. But that's fair.
Okay. Well, I don't mind sending a quick email to Roy, and then maybe coordinating with Glenn and Paul on that.
That'd be great. Thank you, Phil.
Sure.
Okay. I think I got my marching orders on that, and we will move forward with that. And I think the only thing left to do then is to schedule our next meeting and adjourn.
Paul, can you, legally or in line with the open meeting law, circulate a draft copy of whatever your document turns out to be prior to the next meeting?
Yeah, I did circulate a link to the Google Doc.
I understand. I saw it, but I sense that you might be doing some more work on that. That's just why
I will, but you're looking at the live document. So if you want to you can go in tonight and watch me type away on it if you want.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, we shouldn't each one of us edit it, but obviously for obvious reasons. But I think it's okay for us all to look at it
while he's typing.
And while he's typing.
Yeah, right. I think the OML, the proper OML protocol would be to send your comments via email to Glenn and me, Glenn and I. No, Glenn and me.
Yeah, me.
Yeah,
me.
And not to comment within the Google Doc
Right.
as
I did. Sorry, I'll erase them.
Don't worry, or just what? Yeah, I mean, but I think that's the proper protocol.
You're right. I forgot.
Don't worry about it. But that link is live, and so as I add to the document and it gets fleshed out, you will be able to see it there, Charlie. There won't be multiple iterations.
Should we send it individually to the two of you or to the committee?
I think you can copy both of us on the email. You don't have to send two separate emails.
No, I'm just talking about what we commonly.
I think to be safe, just send it to Glenn and.
Yeah, just send it to us. Don't copy the whole committee.
All right.
That probably would be
discussion territory. That's a little bit dicey.
Yeah. I also have one small request of Dave. Dave, would you write up the minutes? Could you, for those of us who don't naturally think to go to the town website to look for things, just mention that the agenda and the Zoom link is on the website? Just have it as maybe the last comment in the minutes or something to remind me where to look.
I always have to remind myself, and finding it is on the agenda. So.
Okay. Well, yeah, the agenda is on the website, but to know to go to.
Right. Got it.
Site's another thing altogether.
Do we want to do a meeting, August 11th? Week of August 10th, week of August 17th, week of August 3rd, if people feel ambitious, whatever, any of those are fine with me.
The latter one part of August is problematic for me.
Yeah.
Between a vacation and potential medical stuff that hasn't been scheduled yet. I'm not sure what my availability is going to be. And it's outpatient stuff, but since I don't know what day it is,
yeah,
it could take out any day those weeks.
Okay.
I second the nomination for August 11th.
Yeah, that was one of the options that they're looking at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, I just don't know what day they're going to pick. It's either going to be that week or the week after, and they just haven't. The doctors are trying to pull together whatever they need to pull together. There's been such a backlog of stuff because of COVID that they're kind of in a scramble to schedule things.
Well, do we want to push for August 3rd, or do we want to punt to August 24th, the week of August 24th?
Well, that's when I'm on vacation. That's the
So the 10th, the week of the 10th, the 17th, and the 24th don't work for you?
The 24th, the week of the 24th is the only one that absolutely doesn't work the whole week. The others, I just don't know which day I'm going to get blocked on yet. I could do, whatever day they do it, I'm good every other day that week. I just don't know what the day is yet.
So we've got
So I think if you pick something other than, so far they're looking at the 11th and the 18th. So if you pick something other than Tuesday, I'll probably be okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But there's still some risk
That's fine.
they've told me that, they may pick a different day.
Does the 12th work for people, or?
Yep.
Good enough.
Yep, that's good for me.
All right.
I mean, worst comes to worst, somebody else will take minutes, It's not wouldn't be the first time.
It wouldn't, but we like to have you when we've got you.
Sure.
Okay, so I'll put down the 12th
Okay.
and send around a agenda and so on, and a link. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Any other feats of strength, airing of grievances?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Hi.
Any opposed? Nope.
Gonna write that down as a roll call vote.
I think we're okay.
I think we're
All
okay.
right, everybody. Thank you very much. And,
Yes, thank you. Good luck with your meeting with Patrice tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, see y'all.
Good night, all.
Take care, guys.
Good night.
Now.